Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, December 2nd here. We've got lots and lots of stuff to talk about. What a busy news day it is. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Third hour guest today will be Virginia State Senator Dick Black, talking about his views on the war in Syria and this letter that he wrote to President Bashar al-Assad expressing those views. So we're looking forward to that. Obviously, the top story right now, there has been a shooting at this facility in San Bernardino that dealt with disabled people. I mean, talk about building sympathy, and it already reeks of a false flag. 3 riflemen escaped in a black SUV. Nobody knows who they are, where they went, and now the media are being kept back from the scene. And that's a red warning flag that somebody put this together very quickly. And I hate to be a cynic, because no matter how cynical I get, I just can't keep up with the real world. But earlier today at another school, there was a lockdown when somebody spotted a gun, and the police went in and searched everybody, and they found 2 more people were carrying guns as well. And I got to tell you what it looks like to me. Obama's been taking a huge amount of criticism for that lame comment he made in Paris the other day about how other countries don't see mass shootings. And, of course, a huge amount of disgust from the French people who went through that attack in Paris earlier in the year, Charlie Hebdo. And it almost seems like the White House wants to go, see. And even the media is saying, as soon as this shooting happened, President Obama was briefed. He's in Paris. What's he going to do? So this reeks of another one of these staged incidents. They found some kids' brains whacked out on prescription antidepressants and sent them on in. I'm sure they got a whole list of these people all primed and ready to go at a moment's notice here. And I'm not buying this one tiny bit. But I did go ahead and post my article on the link between mass violence and prescription antidepressants to the front of WhatReallyHappened.com. We'll probably have more about this later in the show. Now then, getting on over into Syria. And by the way, have you noticed the corporate media, they're sort of downplaying what's going on over in Syria. They're giving it a little token reportage. But the U.S. and the so-called Western coalition are now bringing more troops into Syria to push World War III. We're already seeing the mission creep out there. The U.S. has announced more special operations forces to fight ISIS in Iraq. The Prime Minister of Iraq is saying, no, we don't need them. Please don't bring any more of your people in here. And, of course, the response from the U.S. government is, who cares what you think? You're just the puppet Prime Minister of one of our conquered provinces. You don't have any say in what's going on here. And the reality is the United States continues to justify these military incursions into countries where they are not wanted by the fight against international terrorism and ISIS. But careful analysis of international law, especially following the lessons learned at Nuremberg, the U.S.-led coalition, actually, there's no legal basis for them to go on in and be carrying out airstrikes in Syria or Iraq under this claim of fighting terrorists, especially because they seem to be avoiding the terrorists and bombing economic infrastructure, especially related to oil. That's really what's in play here. We're starting to find out this whole war on Syria is a cover for stealing Syria's oil, smuggling it out through Turkey. It's being sold to third parties, and the financial tentacles for this are beginning to spread into Israel, into Great Britain, into the United States of America. Now, Germany and France are talking about using bases in Turkey for more of their bombing raids into Syria, and a reminder, the only outside nation that has the permission of the Syrian government to be in there is Russia. The United States does not have permission of Syria's government to be there. Germany does not. France does not. They are acting outside international law. They are the rogue nations. They are the aggressors. Now, I'm not the only person drawing parallels with what's going on today and what we saw happen in Vietnam. Oh, we're just sending in advisors. We're sending in trainers. And yet we're already hearing other articles basically saying that, yeah, this is a replay of Vietnam. We'll send some soldiers in there. We'll tell the American people they're just advisors. They're not in combat. They're not in danger. And then all of a sudden we find out quite the contrary. That's exactly what's going on. It's the same scam they pulled last time. Now, over in Great Britain, the Parliament is still meeting. We've not heard the results of the vote. Apparently, Cameron got his vote in Parliament anyway, even though the subcommittee that was looking at this issue said that Cameron hadn't really made a case that there was a justification for doing this. But Cameron, like Tony Blair, could care less about international law. He wants his war, and he wants it now. By golly, that's what we're going to do. Now, Corbyn is out there, and Corbyn is struggling. Because a lot of the Labour Party may go along with the war because it's good for business, and everybody understands that this is really all about propping up the Western financial system against Chinese-Russian encroachments. This could cost Corbyn his leadership, but he's out there fighting the good fight and saying that, if Great Britain starts bombing in Syria, sooner or later there will be troops on the ground. That's a given based on past history, not just of Great Britain, but of the United States, modern war in general. And, of course, he's being criticized and denounced for being pacifistic. And all these Labour MPs saying this war is good. But I don't see any of these Labour leaders screaming about war, resigning their position and going on down to the local enlistment office to sign up and fight it for themselves. They're being splendidly brave with the lives of other people's children. Now, David Cameron has come on out with a bit of rhetoric where anybody opposing his desire to go on in and bomb Syria is obviously sympathizing with the terrorists. That has actually provoked a backlash, not just from Jeremy Corbyn, but Alex Salmond. And it's saying it's demeaning to the office of the Prime Minister. It is an indication of desperation. Now, the Scottish National Party has already announced they will vote against Syria airstrikes. They're not on board with this. The British National Party is denouncing Cameron for the rush to war. Now, another piece of propaganda that Cameron has put on out there is there are 70,000 moderate fighters in Syria. We must protect them from Bashar al-Assad and ISIS. Okay, well, here's the reality. There's no such thing as a moderate terrorist. If they're carrying a gun, they're not moderate. This is just more, remember phony Tony Blair? Oh, they could attack us in 45 minutes. They've got this, they've got that. Downing Street memo all over again. How many times do you have to be lied to until you stand up and say, I am tired of governments lying us into wars of conquest. I'm not going along with this anymore. Polls in Great Britain are showing that only a minority of British voters are backing the idea of Syrian airstrikes. Now, here in the United States of America, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford, has gone public saying that Obama's claims of containment of ISIS, it's nonsense. They're not contained. And it makes perfect sense. The White House never wanted to contain ISIS. It has been confirmed over and over again through multiple sources that the White House was arming and supplying ISIS and using them as a proxy army to overthrow Assad in Syria and retake control of Iraq. That's what's out there. Now, over in Greece, their defense minister has come out with two revelations. First of all, since the shoot-down of the Russian plane, Turkey has stopped regularly violating Greek airspace because they realized what a double standard that was setting. And second, according to their data from Greek radar, Turkey shot down the Russian Su-24 bomber inside Syrian airspace. We'll be back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I'm doing a search through the media out in San Bernardino, California, and sure enough, active shooter drill was planned. Trying to chase down more details on that. Anyway, all right, we're going to take a phone call here. James in Ohio. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. When I heard about this story, the first thing that occurred to me was that, they said there was 3, and I think I heard you say there might be 4 people with guns. When it comes to these independent criminal criminally insane types who kill. Once in a great while, you'll have two that hook up together, but three or four, never. And another thing I thought of was, well, the Sandy Hook thing, pulling the target, I would say that was orchestrated. Whether or not people got killed, I really don't believe personally that they did. But
well, maybe not at Sandy Hook, but definitely today. But at this point, they're going to say, look, we need some dead bodies. People don't believe these things anymore.
Right.
And like I said, there was another incident earlier today where there was a lockdown at another school because somebody spotted a student with a gun. That student got away. The police went in and searched everybody. They found two more people with guns. 3 people all decide spontaneously on their own to have a shooting incident at school on the same day. No. I think that was supposed to be the false flag. That one fell apart, and they went into Plan B immediately. Because, this one, the idea of these 3 guys, they don't know who they are or where they came from, with rifles firing into this center for disabled people. I mean, that's reckless. That's obviously public relations. We need shock value. We need these poor, crippled people shot dead in the streets. Now, of course, they're keeping the media back, and that's always a warning sign that the facts on the ground aren't matching the official story.
I figure they'll probably find 3 guys that died as a result of the quote-unquote suicide pact, and when they go through their room, they'll find some Trump material and, Tea Party and NRA stuff, maybe a poster of Charles.
Yeah, and they'll search the web browser and they'll find WhatReallyHappened.com. They did that with one of the others. This guy read WhatReallyHappened.com. Of course he's a crazy.
But take it easy. That's all I got for you.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot here. Yeah, it's too obvious. And the timing. Obama makes that statement about you don't see these mass shootings in other countries. Everybody in France just loses it. They're totally disgusted with him. And just in time to save Obama from his faux pas, we get, 1.5 shooting incidents here in the United States of America. Anyway, getting on back to the war zones, emphasis on the plural. Over in Lebanon, a member of their parliament, a gentleman named Jumblat, he's the leader of Lebanon's historic Druze community, is saying that is beyond doubt NATO authorized Turkey's downing of the Russian jet trying to provoke a war with Russia. They are desperate to get a war with Russia and China going before the U.S. economy, the dollar-centric economy, collapses. They're in a race. Because if the dollar-centric economy collapses and they don't have a major war to blame it on, it's those Russians and Chinese made your life terrible. You should hate them. Don't hate us. We're the government. You're supposed to love us, of course. Now, Putin has come on out with some additional information. He is saying that the flight plan of that aircraft that was carrying out the bombing mission in Syria was provided by Russia to the U.S. military ahead of time. The United States knew where that plane was going and when it was going to be there, and that's where it got jumped by the Turkish warplanes. Now, over at the United Arab Emirates, they're saying that they've got 65,000 troops that will participate in any international effort demanding a ground intervention into Syria. The problem with all of this is trying to figure out who's actually fighting the terrorists and who is only pretending to fight the terrorists while actually trying to depose Assad, because we know that's been the agenda for more than 4 years now. And Assad has managed to hang on and endure U.S. efforts to replace him with a pliant, obedient Western puppet, which is the next necessary step before they can start that war with Iran they've been drooling over since 2003. Now, Russia continues to provide more proof of Turkey's role in the ISIS oil trade. They have satellite photos, much clearer and sharper than the American satellite photos we're shown to convince us that Russia's in eastern Ukraine. Those are blurry and black and white. Russia's satellite pictures are very sharp and crystal clear. And they've detailed out 3 smuggling routes from within ISIS-controlled areas in Syria's oil fields going into Turkey. And at this point, we're not hearing any more from Erdogan about how if it's proven Turkey was getting ISIS oil that he would resign. Of course he was never going to resign. He was trying to grandstand the how dare you. And as I said, people are starting to look at all the involved oil companies, all the deals going on, who owns the tankers, who owns the trucks. And they're finding the financial tentacles are spreading out all across the globe. Into Great Britain, United States. So, all right, let's grab some phone calls here. We're going to talk to John on the West Coast. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Nice show. I've always been a listener for the past 3 years. I'd like to know exactly on whose side is Germany on. That's my question.
Germany's on Germany's side. Ultimately, they all are.
But are they supporting ISIS? Are they with Assad? Because they flip-flop back and forth, you know. But what do you think?
Well, I think Germany, Merkel is certainly on board with the New World Order, pull together the European Union, get them pacified, get ready to merge with other unions. But it has caused a huge backlash. There's a surge in nationalism in Germany. She's losing influence and the trust of her people because of all the problems coming from the ISIS, from the Syrian refugees. That's caused huge amounts of problem in Germany, which are being reported in the German media but are not being mentioned here in the United States on the corporate media.
And what about their trade with Russia? Aren't they worried about losing? They've been losing business with Russia all this time, and they're still on this world order agenda. This is unbelievable.
Well, they're still on board with extending the sanctions, and yes, all of Europe, and Germany especially, they've suffered huge financial harm by going along with this bash Russia agenda. And Merkel is listening to her cohorts at the New World Order and not to her own people, and that's why she's in trouble politically back home.
This is an economic war against the Germans, against everybody in Europe to go against Russia. They're just killing themselves. And
they really are. They said we'll sanction Russia, we'll cut them off, and they will suffer and die. And they didn't think it all the way through. They didn't spreadsheet it out. And it backflashed. It's caused more damage to the West than to Russia. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Thank you for the call. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're getting more updates on the situation in San Bernardino. The black SUV that the shooters made their escape in has been found abandoned, and more than likely it was stolen in the first place, so they're not going to get any evidence out of that. Now, interestingly enough, the FBI and the ATF are on the ground taking charge of the situation, which in and of itself is grounds for suspicion, because if you remember, the FBI does not actually have jurisdiction unless a crime crosses a state border or takes place on federal property. They're swooping on in. They will be in control of the situation. One of the reasons the media may be kept back, which they're reporting on right now, it's starting to come out over some Twitter posts by people who were actually there that at first they didn't realize it was a real shooting because there had been a drill just days before. Got an email here saying that apparently all of the shootings took place in only one location of the facility, in the auditorium. And there was an event in the auditorium at the time, some meeting of county employees. So, we'll see what's going on. But this has all the hallmarks of somebody's cowboy operation, thrown together at the last second to go on out and create an incident that we can use to grab the guns. What a shame none of those people at that center had a weapon with which they could shoot back. Of course, these three shooters all had rifles. They were firing from a distance. All right, let's grab, and we've got a lot of phone calls waiting here. Chuck in Texas, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Doing okay.
Hey, I wanted to talk about our guys down here in Texas that are going to the mosque with a gun in Irving, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and threatening a bunch of women and children and all. I wanted to throw out an invite to any of your Texas listeners who happen to be in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. They're going to have another one of their. We had a peace march there last Saturday, and a bunch of us were out there showing that we don't support that.
Well, good for you for doing that because, you know, for all we know, these are also more of the U.S. government's actors trying to build sympathy for the Syrian refugees because they're in a real bind. They're out there telling us, Muslims are all fanatics and terrorists and everything, but you've got to let them into your home. And it's quite a contrast. And so they're trying to sell the idea we should feel sorry for all the illegal immigrants and the Syrian refugees coming to this country. At the same time, they're trying to say, well, you know, we've got a right to go in and just bomb all the people in Syria because they're all terrorists and they support Assad and they're all blah, blah, blah. And, when the propaganda starts to bite itself on its backside this badly, you know it's going to fall apart any day now.
Well, I don't know, but I didn't hear much there about the Syrian refugees. The issue here is just, all Muslims are bad, and let's bring back the KKK mentality of going to a mosque with guns and march around with your face covered. Thank you very much, coward.
Well, they don't want you to recognize these FBI informants, again, go back and study the history of COINTELPRO. In the 1960s, when the people of the United States of America were putting aside all their personal differences to unite together against the war in Vietnam and issues of social injustice, the FBI went out and conducted all these undercover operations to turn people against each other, blacks against white, women against men, trying to cause as much divide and conquer. And this is more of the same, only they've got it ramped up into rock and roll, full tilt boogie, afterburner overdrive.
Well, I absolutely agree. That's the big issue to me is this is another distraction. These same people who are out there, threatening the Muslims, 2 weeks ago, what were they doing? Of course, they were against our government. But now it's like, okay, we've got an easier target, a bunch of women and children and, imam and a mosque. These are nice stuff.
Okay, so these same people were like out there doing, we're against the government, we've got guns and everything. Yeah, it's a COINTELPRO op. They must be running out of actors and staff because they keep recycling them, and more people are picking up on that. Anyway, listen, Chuck, sorry to let you go and cut you off short here, but we got a ton of phone calls here, so we are going to switch over to Glenn in Pennsylvania. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Remember the old Casino Royale movie spoof with David Niven and Woody Allen?
Oh, I loved that one.
In the final scene, you had Spectre, you had MI6, you had CIA, cowboys, Indians, the French Foreign Legion, all running around in this chaotic scene at the casino, remember? Mm-hmm. That's like Syria now.
Yes.
You had everybody's, we have arrived, the French we have arrived, the oil emirates, we have arrived, everybody's arriving on the scene.
With one exception. The Native Americans are too smart to get caught up in this mess.
Yeah, exactly. No, well, that was, campy, spoofy stuff, But it's just like, I was like, hey, we've all arrived at Chipin. Yes, it's like trying to figure out, like, okay, how many different groups are sticking their nose in here, and who and what exactly are they shooting at? Well, okay, those guys are going to bomb ISIS, but you guys destroy national infrastructure. That would be good. We'll just level the whole place.
Well, they're creating chaos. They're destroying Syria's ability to harvest their own oil in order to make it easier for ISIS to grab oil. And underneath all this war, they're stealing Syria's oil, is what they're doing. ISIS is doing it, sending it through Turkey. It's going on out to who knows where. We know a lot of it's going to Israel. We know that financial interests in Britain and the United States are part of that. They're making money off of this whole thing. By the time they're done, Syria will be dry and they won't care who's in charge of it anymore. Just so long as the oil goes out and it's sold only for the U.S. dollar.
Primary target. Find a parking lot or a convoy that's comprised of all 10 Toyota trucks and just take it out.
Yeah, we need a Toyota homing missile. I'm sure the Russians are already working on one right now. Okay?
Exactly.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over here to Chris in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, your show has changed my life. You're a truth teller. You're one of a kind. And one time you had made a comment on the show, a quote. You had said the one question that everyone should be asking, and it goes back to your theory of the all wars or bankers wars. And I want to make it my email footnote. That's how much I enjoyed it. You're referring to all Americans should be asking this one question the media won't bring up. and that's in reference to why the United States is not printing its own currency.
Yeah,
The context. So I would like to write that down verbatim, have it on my email, and I want everybody on my email contact list to read that with their own eyes.
Well, the quote is basically in reference to the ongoing debate in the Congress about raising the U.S. debt ceiling again, which they just did, by the way. And the question really isn't whether we should raise the debt ceiling or not. The question all Americans should be asking is why the U.S. government, which is authorized by the Constitution to create and issue a debt-free currency, instead borrows that currency at interest from a privately owned central bank and forces future generations into slavery to that debt. I'll tell you what, if you shoot me an email, I'll send you back the exact quote. I've even got a graphic that goes with it, okay?
Thanks, Mike. Stay on top of that shooting. That is shady as it gets. The 3 shooters, they disappear. There's no evidence. Shady.
Yeah, it's another false flag. Now they're hemming and saying, well, maybe there wasn't really 3 shooters. There's only one, who they'll conveniently find dead somewhere down the road. Thank you for the phone call. Going to let you go and switch to Mo in Florida. Aloha. Actually, Mo, I hate to do this to you. I'm going to have to put you back on hold because we got a commercial break coming on up here, but I will take your call as soon as we're done. So, Mo, thank you very much. I'm putting you back on hold. There we are. Now, Iraq has announced that if Turkey is confirmed to be buying ISIS oil from Syria, they will file a protest at the United Nations Security Council. We already know what the White House is going to do. Veto! I must veto! We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go right to the phone lines here and talk to Mo in Florida. Aloha, Mo. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I appreciate you taking my call. I first of all, I have a question, but I want to thank you for saving me a lot of money. You really did.
Okay.
I've never been to a psychiatrist, but if it wasn't for you, I'd spend a lot of money on a psychiatrist.
I don't know. A lot of people probably think if you're listening to me, you need mental help, and I have no doubt somewhere down the road the government is going to come out and say anybody listening to conspiracy theories, they're mentally ill, and we mandate they get all kinds of prescription psychiatric medication.
Well, I got to divert some of that hit the donate button, but here's my question, if you don't mind, to get on the Donald Trump thing. I don't watch the Main Street news hardly ever, but I watched today because with the shooting, whatever. And there was on one of the stations, Trump's over there. You've probably heard about it, where his comments about the Muslims celebrating at the New York 9/11 disaster, and not one mention about the dancing Israelis. And I know I've read about it. You've talked about it. I had to go online again just to see if I wasn't crazy, and it's very well documented now.
It is it's certainly far better documented than the Muslim celebrations, but Glenn Greenwald, in my opinion, has destroyed his own credibility coming on out and saying that anybody says that Israelis were arrested for celebrating as just being an anti-Semite. Now, there is a video. CBS News had a brief video clip showing what appeared to be Muslims celebrating, and I debated very long and hard linking to it. And in the end I did, because it does vindicate what Trump said, because he's under all these attacks. But you're absolutely right. The corporate media is absolute in lock goose step, not talking about those Mossad agents who were seen cheering and clapping and taking pictures of themselves, selfies in front of the collapsing World Trade Towers. And, people who saw them doing it called the police. They got the license number, and they were working for this urban moving systems, which turned out to be a cover for Israeli intelligence. And the U.S. just very quickly classified all the information related to their arrests and sent them all back home.
Yeah, it's documented.
It is. Multiple sources.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now, getting on back to Syria. We've mentioned before that Israel has now been documented. They're receiving stolen Syrian oil from ISIS via Turkey. In fact, Israel is getting so much oil from ISIS, they've now announced they're going to plan to export natural gas. And the natural gas they're getting is offshore in the Mediterranean. The problem is, much of what Israel claims to be their natural gas fields are inside territorial waters claimed by Gaza and Lebanon. Like ISIS in Syria, Israel is just stealing carbon resources that don't belong to them and selling them off. Here, help yourself. Netanyahu has now openly admitted Israel carries out military operations in Syria from time to time. Now, he justifies it by saying that Iran is trying to create a new front against Israel in the Golan Heights, which is nonsense. What's really going on is they've discovered huge resources of oil and gas underneath the Golan Heights, and Israel wants to keep it and sell it. And Israel understands that on the day when Russia finally gets all the terrorists out of Syria, the first thing Assad is going to do is come back on down and say, look, that Golan Heights is part of Syria. Okay? It doesn't belong to Israel. It isn't, Israel's annexation of the Golan is not recognized internationally. It's not even recognized by their puppet government in Washington, D.C. And so Netanyahu is trying to basically militarily cement Israel's possession of this oil and gas resource. It's got nothing to do with Iran. Now, over in Israel, even Haaretz is now admitting that there is a problem with IDF soldiers abusing the Palestinians, and especially the detainees, incidents of Palestinians who are already handcuffed and subdued being brutally beaten. And there's token talk about an investigation, but we know nothing's going to happen to these people. It never ever does here. Now, the State Department in Washington, D.C. has come out criticizing Moscow's move against George Soros non-governmental organizations that were operating inside Russia, and basically denounced Russia's ban because, George Soros, it's all pro-democracy charities, and you should never, ever oppose a pro-democracy charity. Except you need to remember that back in May of 2014, George Soros admitted to CNN's Fareed Zakaria that he is responsible for establishing that foundation in Ukraine that ultimately overthrew the country's elected leader. Soros has admitted that's what his groups do, and Russia has every right to throw them out. And the State Department is throwing a tantrum. Soros was going to overthrow Putin for us. How dare you kick him out? You can't do that by the rules we just made up. Russia has just had a successful test of their anti-satellite missile. Everybody's warming up for the big one. And Moscow has placed their command plane on active service. This is their version of the U.S. NECAP and TACAMO aircraft, airborne command posts. And they're putting it on active duty, standby, ready to go at a moment's notice. Everybody understands that when this war gets going, it could go nuclear almost in an instant. So many hotheads with those little brass keys. Now, here's something else from the State Department. And this is kind of interesting. The State Department has come out with a policy that Obama's deal with Iran is really optional because it isn't a treaty ratified by the legislatures in both countries. It's merely an agreement, and it's not really legally binding. It merely signals a political intention, and it can be withdrawn by a subsequent president, and for that matter, could be withdrawn by Iran. They're basically setting the stage for completely abandoning the P5+1 and saying, well, it didn't really matter anyway. We're going to drop the bombs. But they just put themselves in a real corner. Because if these agreements are political and not legally binding, the way a treaty is, that also applies to the TPP, the TTIP, as well as whatever it is they're cooking up over in Paris. If it's not a treaty ratified by the Congress, it's not legally binding. Sauce for the goose, sauce for the gander. That's exactly what's going on. A little bit of an update from the false flag in Paris. Apparently one of the suicide bombers trained to shoot at the French Police Gun Club. A little bit of a giveaway there. All right, as we come up on the top of the hour talking about the economy, the 10 biggest Wall Street banks are facing legal action for price fixing in the $320 trillion derivative market. Class action lawsuits been filed by a bunch of people who were literally looted of billions of dollars in Wall Street's rigging of the derivative market. They haven't learned any lessons from 2008, and they won't, because they never pay the consequences of their crimes. You do. The losses from all of Wall Street's crimes are dropped on you in the form of bailouts, TARP, quantitative easing, and that is the essence of fascism. The rich get to keep their money. The losses are passed on to the people. We're not a capitalist country anymore. We've descended into outright fascism. And as we sink deeper into economic fascism, the fascistic nature of our government starts to reveal itself. We're seeing in all these countries where the mask of civil liberties and freedom and rights is dropping, and we're seeing the face of autocratic government. You will not doubt global warming. You will believe that Saddam had nuclear weapons. You will do as you are told. You will believe as you are told, or bad things will happen to you. Anyway, the Bloomberg Commodity Index is down for the 5th month in a row. This is confirming the concerns that we saw with the Baltic Dry Index. And Goldman Sachs has announced that Brazil has now officially plunged into an outright depression. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And this story in San Bernardino gets better and better and better. It is now confirmed that the reason the SWAT team responded so quickly to the report of the shooter at the Inland Regional Center is they were training nearby and they were already suited up and ready to roll when the call came in. What an amazing coincidence. How very lucky. Remember, they did that in Paris. You know, that all the French authorities were ready to go because they were having a drill right there. And boy, they just went live immediately. It is appalling what ruling parties will do to trick you and bamboozle you into what they want, which in this case is they want the guns. Actually, in today's case, I think it was just to save Obama from embarrassment after he made that stupid comment about other nations don't have these mass shootings. So, anyway, Paul Craig Roberts has a story out now about democracy sold out to greed. And he's talking about the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which, according to the State Department, even if they're agreed to, it's not actually legally binding, although they'll say, oh, well, no, these, we must abide by these. The one with Iran, well, yeah, we don't have to do that. But basically saying what we've all been worried about, that this is putting multinational corporations higher up over sovereign national governments. And it all comes down to the phrase restraint on trade. Anything any government does that harms profits can be overruled by the corporations because it's a restraint on trade. We're selling dangerous pharmaceuticals and toxic food, and if you tell your people that these medications are dangerous and the food may be harmful, you're restraining our trade and you will stop doing it. That's literally, that's literally what it's about, the rise of corporate rule. And I have a problem with that, because corporate rule is actually very similar to theocratic rule in a very critical sense. Theocratic rule and corporate rule are unconcerned with the welfare of ordinary people. Totally. Under theocratic rule, anything is justified because it's the will of the imaginary playmate in the sky. And under corporate rule, anything is allowable as long as it boosts profit. You know, we're going to shut this school down here, take all those kids, and we're going to grind them up for medical experiments because we can make money for that. Oh, yeah, you know, and you can't stop us. That's restraint of trade. As bad as civil government can be, it still has to be responsive to some degree to the needs of the general population. Corporate government is the absolute crystallization of the concept of fascism. All driven by money and the money junkies. And the fact that it may be selling products that are harmful to people, may be causing tremendous environmental damage with their GMO accidents. It's not a factor anymore. You can't complain about what we're doing. You're restraining our trade. You're harming our profits. And Paul Craig Roberts is absolutely right. This is the beginning of corporate dictatorship for the entire globe. Now, getting on down to Hillary Clinton, people are starting to come on out and talk about how, at this point, the count of Hillary Clinton emails on her weak private server that contain classified information is now just shy of 1,000. And everybody's trying to say, well, you know, this email thing, it's kind of gone away, and they're trying to bury it. They're trying to make it go away, and we know why. There are bigger scandals behind that email server. The email server, that's the limited hangout. Behind that is the confirmation that, yes, the U.S. was using that consulate in Benghazi to smuggle weapons from Libya to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria at the same time the government was telling you ISIS and Al-Qaeda are our enemies in the war on terror. Now, Hillary Clinton is on the war path against the Second Amendment. She thinks guns are bad, except, of course, those that are being carried by her taxpayer-funded armed security, which she has enjoyed ever since her husband was president. She has never been without armed bodyguards, Secret Service protective detail, ever since Bill Clinton was president. Guns are good for her, but not for anybody else. Guns are bad. Now, on Black Friday, one area of commerce that did do well was gun sales. They set an all-time single-day record for background checks. That's how they track the number of gun sales, legal gun sales. We don't know what's going on out in the hinterland. But they hit an all-time record. Every time the gun grabbers pull another one of these stunts, gun sales go up. And people understand. You know, we're being told we shouldn't blame all Muslims for the crimes of a few fanatics. Okay, let's not blame all law-abiding gun owners for the crimes of a few crazies whose brains are melted on prescription antidepressants, or who are actors trying to push the gun grabber agenda. Now, drunk drivers kill more Americans than assault rifles do, by quite a wide margin. But nobody talks about banning cars for the law-abiding safe drivers. We all understand the problem with drunk drivers isn't the car. It's the chemical that messes up his brain or her brain. Only in the case of guns are the actions of these wackos whose brains are melted on prescription antidepressants used to justify taking guns away from the rest of us. Because that's the real goal. The government doesn't care about people getting shot up in the Inland Regional Center or Sandy Hook or anywhere else. They're afraid of you right now. They know they've lost the trust of the American people. They can't lie to us with impunity. That makes them impotent. Because lying to you to control you is the only way they know how to run a government. They've been doing it for so long. They've forgotten any other way to run a nation other than lies, fraud, and deception. And they're scared. They're very much afraid of you. That's why they were trying to put out that hoax about the NSA is watching everything you do, so be careful of what you say. You better not shout, you better not cry, you better not pout, I'm telling you why, the NSA is spying on you. Now, earlier today, Fox News came out with this report that there is now a poll showing that in a runoff between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton will win by a small percentage. Well, if that's true, then I guess the GOP and the corporate media can stop worrying about kicking Donald Trump out of the GOP nomination. Because if Hillary could actually beat Trump, then she is going to stomp all over everybody else in the GOP lineup. But remember, the announced public polls do not actually measure public sentiment. They're there to try and manufacture it. 87% of people think you should rub blue mud into your navel. So rush on down to the store and get your jar of blue mud. Don't want to go against the flow. So, of course, we ran our own poll on WhatReallyHappened.com. If next year's election came down to Trump versus Hillary, who would you vote for? Trump got 95%. Hillary got 5%. That sounds a lot more accurate to me than what was being promoted by Fox News a little bit earlier. Jeb Bush is dropping hints that his choice for a vice presidential running mate will also be a woman. That's going to yank the rug out from underneath Hillary's vagina vote. Won't say who it is. I don't know. Caitlyn? I don't think so. But that's where they're going with that. Now, the debate over the Trump's comments about celebrating Muslims has heated up a little bit. It's being used to attack him. We're going to talk a little bit about that when we come back from these commercials. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. And, of course, Hillary Clinton, whose campaign for next year, it has a major platform. We will get the guns away from the law-abiding American citizens because that'll stop the criminals and everything. Of course it won't. The U.S. government is giving criminals guns through Fast and Furious. They're giving guns to ISIS. They're giving guns to Al-Qaeda. It's only the law-abiding American citizen that they want disarmed because they're afraid of you. But Hillary's already out there screaming, we've got to ban guns, which means we'll probably see another record set for gun sales. Every time the gun grabbers go on the rampage, Americans arm themselves because they understand what's really going on here. The Second Amendment is not about hunting. It is not about sport shooting. It's about giving the government a reason to leave the people alone. Now then, getting on back to the campaign trail, as you know, Donald Trump has been roundly attacked for saying that he saw Muslims celebrating on 9/11, and there's been a great deal of confusion about that. Nobody in the corporate media is talking about the arrested Israelis. Glenn Greenwald says anybody who says Israelis were arrested on 9/11 is just being an anti-Semite, which is why I now think that whole Edward Snowden thing was a gigantic bluff to try and scare us all into silence. Didn't really work very well, did it? Now, there seems to be a little bit of confusion because apparently there was a report on CBS showing two of their reporters down by Ground Zero saying Muslims were celebrating. But the video does not actually show any Muslims celebrating on 9/11. But anybody who saw that report on TV would have come away with that impression. Oh, the Muslims are celebrating the collapse of the World Trade Towers. And this many years after the event, probably people are saying, oh yeah, I heard about that. I think maybe I saw it. And that's where the confusion is coming from. But of course, they're using it on Trump because they're trying to give him the Ron Paul treatment. They want him out. They're not even concealing the fact that they are terrified of Donald Trump. They don't want him in the Oval Office because he's got his own money. He can't be bought. He can't be told what to do. But apparently this whole argument over just who was celebrating when the World Trade Towers came down has led to a renewed interest in the dancing Israelis, those Mossad agents who were using urban moving systems as a cover for what they were doing. And it's like the number 3 trending topic on web searches right now. People are looking at that. And it's followed closely behind by Carl Carmen's 4-part news story on the Israeli spy ring for Fox News, in which it is admitted there was evidence linking these arrested Israelis to 9/11, but it is classified by the United States government. So, anyway, now, up in Oregon, this is getting a little Twilight Zone. A group of illegal immigrants is suing the state of Oregon to overturn a voter-approved initiative denying driver's licenses to illegal immigrants. Now, a little bit of common sense. They're not supposed to be here, let alone on the roads. And I have to wonder, how are people who are not legally in this country, how do they have standing in court to even bring a lawsuit in the first place? And again, I'm not being racist. If you want to come to the United States and you want to follow the legally prescribed path to citizenship, welcome. I hope it meets your expectations. It probably won't these days, but welcome anyway. When you talk about illegal immigrants, and I know the politically correct people saying, you should just call them undocumented workers. No, I'm going to call them illegal immigrants. I'm a big boy. I'll decide for myself what's going on here. And that first word says it all. They are illegal. They are criminals the moment they step over the border. They don't have legal rights. They aren't entitled to any social services funded by legal taxpayers. This is the New World Order trying to blur all of humanity together into one lump of people who don't have a clear idea who they are, no sense of regional identity, no sense of historical identity, just all hugging each other and singing Kumbaya and willing, obedient workers for the New World Order. Now, we're starting to see a pushback on America's college campuses over the politically correct movement, where everybody's out there whining and, oh, I'm offended. And, okay, be offended. Nothing happens when you're offended. You know, grow up. Develop a thick hide, for crying out loud. Now, Dr. Everett Piper, who's the president of Oklahoma Wesleyan University, you know, came on out talking to these whiners saying, look, this is a university. It's not a daycare center. And he's sick and tired of all these PC students whining and crying that the world isn't what they want it to be. You know something? The world isn't what anybody wants it to be, except for the top 1/10 of 1% of the money junkies. They can pretty much buy the world they want, like Soros is doing. But for the vast majority of people, the world is never going to be what you want it to be. You're going to whine and cry about it for the rest of your life? It's ridiculous. Now then, Black Lives Matter. There was apparently a Black Lives Matter supporter who threatened to massacre 16 white students who has been allowed back on the college campus by order of a federal judge. The fact that he's out there saying he wants to kill white people left and right, he's not a danger. We can let him back there. And that's followed by the story of Kayla Simone McKeeby from Keene University, who was a protest leader on November 17th in a rally about out-of-control racism on university campuses. And she used as her documentation a series of racist threats posted to Twitter. It's now been discovered she created that Twitter account herself. She's a black student. She created the Twitter account and posted all these messages of hate and racism against black. She's now been arrested. It's a total fraud. It's a total fake. She's probably not going to go to jail. For all we know, she's part of the COINTELPRO program. Go back and look at the history of COINTELPRO and all the dirty tricks the FBI pulled to get the black people and the white people angry with each other, to get them fighting each other so they couldn't unite together in opposition to the war in Vietnam and other government crimes. This all happened under Richard Nixon. We know what a swell president he was. This is how government controls you. The most important lesson you can learn and pass on to your children is how government controls you with dirty tricks, lies, fraud, and deception. That's what they do. That's all they do. It's all they know how to do. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, according to the director of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, in a report to the United States Congress, 179,000 of the illegal immigrants currently roaming free inside the United States of America have been convicted of committing major crimes in their home countries, including violent ones, rape and murder. And reports are that they are continuing to do exactly the same thing here. All right, let's go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call. Steve in Florida, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mikey. How are you?
Fine.
Good, good. Hey, I'd just like to talk about Greenwald and Snowden. James Corbett and Sybil Edmonds go on about that. I've heard it about a year and a half ago, but there was so much fishy stuff going on there because Sybil asked the question, why would Snowden leave the country and give all of these top secret documents to somebody he didn't even know, i.e. Greenwald, and just trust him with them? And then Greenwald is connected with Soros.
Yes.
And they were supposed to start their own radio show or something like that. But, and then,
I'd like to respond to what you just said here, because One of the question marks I had about the story right from the start was the media treatment, because the NSA spying on us all is not a new story. It goes all the way back to the 1980s in a program called Echelon, or Five Eyes, and we've been reporting on it in the independent media. Corporate media would never touch the story. Then all of a sudden, Snowden comes along, and the media gives it huge coverage. And, that said, okay, this has stopped being a story that the media is trying to hush up, and it's now a story the media is promoting for us all to understand and to know. And I had a question mark right from that point forward, but with Glenn Greenwald attacking me as an anti-Semite for reporting on the arrested Israelis at the World Trade Center, I said, okay, Greenwald is definitely hand in glove with the propaganda. He apparently wrote another recent editorial where he was saying that, America's purpose in Syria and everything, where they're real, we're after the terrorists here, and, clearly we know there's another agenda entirely at work. And so as far as I'm concerned, the benefit of the doubt that I had for Mr. Greenwald has pretty much run out at this point.
Well, and then, she calls, and most people call Snowden Snow Job. And,
well, I'm a little late to the party, but I agree.
But, yeah, there was just too many fishy things about that big, huge story about him flying around. They thought he was on the plane from Russia with ambassador from Bolivia.
Yeah.
And they had to gas up in Europe, and they wouldn't let them land. Nobody would let them land except Austria. And a big, huge story. Well, if they were looking for him, what better place to find him? On a runway? They thought Snowden was on the plane. Well, what a perfect place to get him if that's what they wanted to do, right?
Well, it was a big story. It was a big story because, diplomats have special immunity, and interfering with a diplomat flying from one country to another is definitely a major upset in international relations. I understand. I've been seeing all along these reasons to question the Snowden story, but with this latest announcement by Glenn Greenwald that anybody who says Israelis were arrested on 9/11 is just being an anti-Semite, when it is so well documented. That was the straw that broke my camel's back.
Yeah.
Okay? All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now then, getting on back to the police. As you know, there's a big stink growing over this whole Laquan McDonald shooting by the police. And it's getting even worse because the police video was withheld. Apparently, McDonald's family was literally offered an immediate $5 million payout as long as they would not release the dash cam video of Laquan's shooting. Well, the video came out anyway, completely contradicted the official story about Laquan lunging at the officer with a knife. Then there was the revelation that a security camera at a local Burger King had caught the whole incident. But, oh, gee whiz, the video of the actual moment of the shooting isn't there. Must have been a malfunction. Well, it turns out there was a second security camera at the Burger King that documented the police sitting down at the control console for the security system for the restaurant and literally deleting the files. This just gets worse and worse and worse. All right, we're going to grab another phone call here. Keith in Montana. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Hope you and Claire are doing fine.
We're doing...
Go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say a general notice of interest that I have personally, and maybe your listeners and viewers may not like this, but, when I see these shootings and whether they're staged or whatever like that, I can't help but think, who cares? I mean, the media has sanitized U.S. wars, whether it's the napalming of Vietnam, the Rhine POW camps, and the 1,000 sorties over Tokyo that burned alive 16 square miles. Am I supposed to feel any more guilt or something like that because an American dies over someone else?
I understand what you're saying, and I think part of the problem is that our media has conditioned us to assume that certain deaths are more important than others. And I can't think of a more obvious dichotomy than Israel and Palestine, where, some Israeli gets her hair mussed and it's a tragedy, And, we had that video that surfaced yesterday where the IDF was literally throwing a knife at the feet of this Palestinian girl and ordering her to pick it up. And the only reason they didn't shoot and kill her was they finally realized somebody was capturing it on video.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing with the depleted uranium in Iraq and stuff, and the long-going issues. Or when they talk about something that's mundane, like what about the 300,000 veterans that have died because of the VA scandal and stuff? I mean,
because they've been neglected. Well, those crippled soldiers, they cost us money. Let's just let them go away and die. And we're not supposed to feel sorry for them. We're supposed to be very concerned about these people who just got killed in San Bernardino. That's going to be the big event. But again, if you look at the total number of people, Americans, murdered by the police departments wrongfully, it's a huge number, but we're not supposed to care about them. If the police shoot them, we should just assume that they must have done something. Even though this case up in Chicago is clearly showing. This officer literally unloaded his gun into this kid and was in the process of reloading when other officers said, look, stop. This is out of control here. And
Mike, it goes back to who's training them. That's
exactly it. We have all these Israeli security companies in this country training our police departments to treat us the way the IDF treats the Palestinians, and that's exactly what they're doing right now. This video over Laquan McDonald shows it. And to top it all off, there's now another officer who's gone public saying that the order for this cover-up went right up to the office of Rahm Emanuel himself.
Well,
yes,
never let a good crisis go to waste, right?
This wasn't a crisis. This was a cover-up. Yes, the police, they're not going to stop the police from brutalizing and repressing the American people. They just don't want the bad publicity. It's bad for tourism and whatever. Anyway, Keith, I need to let you go. We're about ready to take a break for another commercial, and we'll be back with more about all this nonsensical stuff going on. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're just getting word here that over in Great Britain, the Parliament has just approved David Cameron's plan to go in and start bombing Syria. And this is, of course, an act of war. When you go in and bomb somebody else's country, it doesn't matter what pretext or excuse they're using. Oh, we're only bombing the ISIS or the Al-Qaeda. And we know from the last year that's not what they're doing. This is an invasion. This is the beginning of World War III for real. And they're out there screaming, Russian aggression. Russia shouldn't be in Syria. Russia's the only outside country invited in by Syria's government. The U.S. has no business there. Legal experts are saying it doesn't matter if there's terrorists there or not. There is no legal basis in international law for any other country to be in Syria other than Russia, who is there at the invitation of the legitimate government. So it doesn't matter how they wrap it up and decorate it. This is outright, unprovoked aggression against other countries, which is nothing new if you've been watching what the U.S. has been doing for the last 14 years. And I know most Americans don't want to confront that reality, but in this world war, it is the United States that is the aggressor. It's the United States that is this world war's version of the Nazis, complete with concentration camps, torture, false flags. Wars started with lies. Now we're getting an update from San Bernardino. A lot of people are monitoring the police scanner out there. And a little detail which is not being reported by the American corporate media. The Be on the Lookout has been issued for gentlemen that are either Hispanic or Middle Eastern males. Apparently they just saw dark skin and they're casting a wide net. And, of course, somebody's going to take Middle Eastern and say, oh, Syrian terrorists. No, Middle Eastern also includes Israel. Israel's in the Middle East. Now, as I mentioned earlier today in Memphis, at Trezevant High School in Memphis, Tennessee, a student was seen bringing a gun to the campus. He was spotted. He turned around and ran. The police put the school on lockdown, found 2 other people also carrying weapons. Now, I don't really believe the idea that 3 students just all got it into their heads on the same day to do something at this Memphis high school. I think this was going to be another false flag. I think Obama wanted 2 shootings on the same day, and that'll silence all those people who criticize my comment about you don't see these shootings in other countries. Because 2 in one day, that would trump Paris and Charlie Hebdo. And I wonder what prescription psychiatric medications these people were on here. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog, actually coming out of The Intercept. Michigan prosecutors have been coercing their crime labs to falsify marijuana THC test results. They're going after medical marijuana users because there's a wrinkle in the law. If you are a medical marijuana user, you're allowed to have marijuana, but for some reason, synthetically made THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, which is the intoxicant, that possession of that is still a felony. And so the Michigan prosecutors have been pressuring the lab when the marijuana comes in from somebody being arrested to say it's synthetic THC so they can put them away on a felony. Anyway. Getting on to human cause, global warming. We're coming up on the top of the hour in our interview with Senator Black. More and more people are standing up and saying, this is complete and utter nonsense. The former Bolivian climate negotiator, Pablo Solon, is saying this Paris Agreement will see the planet burn. And he means in the economic sense. Now, this guy used to be on the inside of the human cause global warming clique. He changed his mind. Now he's on the outside. And he's blowing the whistle about all the lies and fraud and deception. Even Ron Paul has come on out and saying this climate change issue really bugs me because it's so distorted. If you look at geologic history, climate's always changing. In fact, it's changed more dramatically and more chaotically in the past than it is today. And he's absolutely right. Another article coming out of Natural News. The global warming hoax unravels. Global science fraud engineered to control humanity, not to save it. That's exactly what's going on. The U.S. is losing economic control over the world through the dollar. They want to reassert hegemonic domination of the global economy through the use of carbon taxes and the authority to tell this country, you may sell your oil, gas, and coal, but this other country over here cannot. It's all politics. The data does not support the claims. Another story coming out of Stephen Goddard, the drowning island scam. Sea level in the Maldives is the same today as it was 20 years ago. Believe it or not, Charles Darwin actually noted in his journals when he was sailing around, doing all of his research, coral reefs are not rigid. They're aggregates of the coral itself which floats, and gravel and dust and the rest. The reefs rise with the sea level. You're not going to see these islands go away from rising sea. The coral and everything else will go with it. And for these islands that are nothing but coral. Now remember back in May of 2014, the French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius said, we have only 500 days to get the climate under control, or there will be utter climate chaos all over the world. And his 500 days ran out in late September of this year. And we've got a little rain here today, but that's about as chaotic as it is. All of these hysterical, fear-mongering headlines, snowfalls are now a thing of the past. The polar bears will drown. All of them have been exposed as lies, and still they're out there pushing this. France is using the anti-terror laws to literally place anybody opposed to the global warming hoax under house arrest. If they show up at the COP21 summit with a protest sign, they will go to jail. No more freedom of speech in France. Like I said before, the mask of civil liberties is starting to drop, and the world is getting a look at the fascist dictatorship that has taken over every single country, enslaved to a private central bank. Over at Natural News, they're reporting on how, once again, the various government agencies that are out there screaming about how hot the world is have been caught rigging the data. Remember, NOAA came out with this report earlier this year saying that there had been no pause in global warming, temperatures were still rising continuously. Congress wanted to investigate. NOAA is still refusing the data. Scientists within NOAA have blown the whistle, saying this is a political document to support Obama in Paris. It's not based on truth or reality. NOAA is refusing the data and emails and methodology, saying they're protecting the integrity of the scientific process by keeping it all secret. And that is about as anti-science as you can get. Now, there is a little bit of good news. Despite the French misuse of their terror laws, there is a new documentary being premiered near the summit location. It's called Climate Hustle. And it's a new documentary. It's looking to be as powerful as the great global warming hoax that we've all seen before. And it's 30 renowned scientists and climate experts saying this is all nonsense. Climate changes on its own. The sun is cooling. The earth is cooling. This is all about money and control. Now, the French media is absolutely excoriating Obama over his comment about shootings. And that's why I think we had the one success and one failed stage shooting today, so that Obama could say, see, you don't get two in one day. Only the United States gets that. See, I was right all along. The French media is also denouncing Poroshenko for his comment that what Paris had to endure for just one day is what Kiev is struggling with every single day because of Crimea and the eastern Ukrainian republics. And the French threw out a few French words that I can't repeat on the radio, slapped their hands to their foreheads and declared the whole thing in terrible, terrible taste. All right, there's the music. We're going to take a break for our top of the hour news, commercials. When we come on back, Virginia State Senator Dick Black will be our on-air guest talking about Syria. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And joining us as our on-air guest is Virginia State Senator Dick Black. And Senator, I cannot tell you how happy I am that we got you on the show here, because you made quite a bit of a stir with a letter that you wrote to Bashar al-Assad about the war in Syria. And why don't you just bring our listeners up to date on what that's all about?
Well, you know, I wrote, it was April of 2014. I wrote to President al-Assad, and I thanked him for the Syrian army's gallant rescue of the Christian villages that lie along the Kaahumanu mountain range between Lebanon and Syria. And I told him I thanked him for them rescuing the Christians, and especially for 13 Catholic nuns who were being held as human shields. And I also said that I could not explain to him why the United States, which had been attacked by al-Qaeda and had lost 3,000 Americans at the Twin Towers and the Pentagon, was now, we'd gone full circle, and we were now supporting al-Qaeda in Syria. So those were really the 2 points that I made. And at the time, the world press just went crazy, and we had probably 100 different news organizations that we had tracked that just went berserk. You know, that they were so outraged that I would thank the Syrian president because their army helped Christians, and also that I would dare to reveal that we were supporting al-Qaeda over there. So that was what started the whole thing.
Well, you know, obviously at the time you wrote that letter, it was still pretty much concealed from the majority of the American people that the U.S. government was, in fact, arming and supporting ISIS and al-Qaeda. Now, of course, that's been confirmed. Judicial Watch got a declassified U.S. government document that supported it. Some of Hillary Clinton's emails support that, and it's pretty much common knowledge now. I believe a quote that was attributed to you is the war on Syria was an unlawful war of aggression, which apparently is the opinion of scholars in international law.
Yes. If you go back General Wesley Clark has an incredible interview that he did some years ago, and Wesley Clark was not just your ordinary guy. He was the Supreme Allied Commander Europe, and he commented. You can find him on on YouTube video quite easily if you just Google Wesley Clark says U.S. To topple 7 different countries. And what he said was that he had been to the Pentagon. He had visited with various officials there, and that one of the generals told him, he said, "I've got to tell you something." He said, "What?" He said, "We're going to attack Iraq." He said, "Well, why?" He said, "Do we find out that they had some connection with 9/11?" And the fellow said, "No." He said, "It's just, we've got to do something, so that's what we're going to do." Well, he said then he went back several weeks later, and he said, we still headed in that direction. And the guy said, "Oh yeah." He said, "It's worse than that." He said, he pulled out a set of plans, and he said, "This just came down from the Secretary of Defense office." He said, we're planning to attack seven different countries, and they included Libya and Syria, and so it's really amazing to have an admission like that come from somebody who had been the Supreme Allied Commander Europe. Now, those plans were not carried out. Now, the plans were developed in 2001. It wasn't until after Hillary Clinton became the Secretary of State that we actually implemented them. And with Libya had actually become, we'd had our problems with it in the past, but Gaddafi had finally become one of our closest allies in the war against terror. But the people planning to overthrow Syria needed the weapons that Colonel Gaddafi had, and so we staged an uprising in Benghazi using CIA, MI6, various covert operations. And then we declared this no-fly zone, which really was a free bombing zone. And we went in and we just bombed the smithereens out of Libya. And before Gaddafi was even, driven from power and murdered, the Turks had begun shipping captured weapons from an airfield in Libya, and those weapons were sent to Turkey and then across the border from Turkey into Syria. So we actually, through covert activities, we began the war in Syria. And, of course, we've been whining and complaining about, oh, my gosh, why can't we have peace in Syria? Well, we can't have peace in Syria because we are literally behind the war in Syria. When the Russians went in recently, they began having enormous success. The Syrian army started advancing, and without any hesitation, the United States released advanced anti-tank missiles through the Saudi government, and those anti-tank missiles have somewhat blunted the attack by the Syrian army. Of course, those TOW missiles went to the Al-Qaeda affiliates over there. So here we've gone full circle. Al-Qaeda attacked us, killed 3,000 Americans. Today, we supply Al-Qaeda with anti-tank missiles so that they can block the legitimate government of Syria from restoring order in its country.
Well, it is a mess. There's no two ways about that. And I can imagine. I'm not exactly sure why your letter to Assad became newsworthy more recently, but it did seem to be getting a lot of attention, certainly in the independent media. And it sounded like there had been some kind of a follow-up or something that made it more newsworthy. Were there any later letters between the two of you, or somebody just decided to try and kick this up, possibly as a political weapon? I imagine you may be up for re-election next year.
Well, I've just completed a re-election cycle. I was re-elected, and so. But however, in the course of it, I feel so passionately about this that I was prepared to lose my Senate seat over this. I'm very distressed. You know, I was a U.S. Marine. I fought in Vietnam. I was a pilot. I flew 269 combat missions.
Senator,
came back with bullet holes in the plane 4 times.
Senator, I'm going to have to put you on pause here. We got to take a 4-minute break for commercials, and then we'll be back. And I'd love to hear the rest of your story about your combat pilot years. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Virginia State Senator Dick Black, talking about his letter to Bashar al-Assad, the acknowledgement that the U.S. war on Syria is an unlawful war of aggression. It's becoming, unfortunately, a common theme in recent history. And, Senator, you were telling us about your experience as a combat pilot in Vietnam.
Yeah, I guess my point was that, you know, I have shed a lot of blood for this country. I also fought on the ground with the 1st Marine Regiment. I had both of my radio men killed right beside me while we were attacking enemy positions. So I'm not a leftist. I'm not somebody who's just a hair trigger anti-war type. But we used to sing to keep our honor clean. And I don't think our honor is clean in Syria. I think it's a despicable war, and we should not be in there. The Syrian war. It's an interesting thing. They're always trying to smear Syria, and the fact is that before the war began, before we instigated the domestic unrest and then converted it to a revolution, Syria had the greatest religious freedom and the greatest women's rights of any Arab nation. People don't realize that. The Syrian constitution today guarantees women's rights, and it guarantees freedom of religion. It actually has provisions for an elected presidency. And in 2014, they conducted a fairly free and fair election, and the people elected President Assad. Now, we call him a dictator. I'm not sure how you define dictator if you have somebody who's popularly elected by the vast majority of the people. And meanwhile, our coalition partners, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and UAE and all of these places, if you talked about having an election, they'd cut your head off. So we certainly are on the wrong side of all of this. The fact is, we have all these meetings and we say, well, we need to get rid of President Assad, and we're going to set up some sort of a regime. Well, we've been trying through 5 years of war to topple the government of Syria. I'm not sure what gives us the right to decide for the Syrian people what form of government they should have. And you think of it, after 5 years of war, NATO, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, Turkey, still cannot identify one single rebel leader who enjoys the popular support of the people. So we're talking about installing a quisling like Hitler did in Norway back in the Second World War. He toppled Norway, and he had to put somebody in charge and put this guy Quisling that eventually became one of the most hated figures in history. That's what we're trying to do.
Yes.
And we need to understand that if Damascus falls, then the dread black and white flag of Al-Qaeda will fly over the capital. They will have established a nation caliphate, and in short order, Lebanon and Jordan will fall, and they will begin a historic drive on Europe. And we will have facilitated this through our incessant war policies in Syria.
Well, it's called blowback, and it does seem that when certain parties plan these little overthrows, these regime changes, they tend not to think them through in the long term. We know that since the end of World War II, the United States has covertly tried to regime change 50 other countries. They've succeeded about half the time. The CIA now openly admits they overthrew the elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran in 1953. And installed the Shah, who was clearly a dictator. That ultimately led to the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Same thing with Pinochet in Chile in 1973. And every time we go in and we mess around with another country, there's always going to be blowback. And it's kind of funny to see somebody like President Bush get up and say, they hate us for our freedoms. And no, they hate us because we mess around with their countries. We go on in, we tinker with their countries, and they'll just be living ordinary lives, standing in the market square, and all of a sudden there's a huge explosion. People they've known all their lives are in bloody shreds and stamped on the shrapnels made in the USA, and that's the real reason why the United States is not very well loved around the world. But it is a continuation of a long, ongoing policy, but it does appear to have stumbled very, very badly, both in Syria, up in Ukraine, in Yemen. A couple of years ago, they were saying that was a successful intervention. Now they're having to go back into that. Same thing with Libya. They're having to go back in there. This policy of regime change is starting to fall apart, mostly because people around the world understand that's what's really been behind so much of the domestic upset in their own countries. I mean, we've had Russia has just kicked George Soros, non-governmental organizations, out of Russia. The State Department is saying, how dare you ban pro-democracy charities? But Soros admitted to CNN that his organizations helped bring about the coup d'etat in Kiev that brought Poroshenko to power. And so this stuff used to be hidden from the population in general, and it isn't anymore, and that's why it's not getting the traction that it used to get. We have about 2 minutes left here. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners? I know you've got to go on to another engagement.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on. The one thing I would say is that as far as the war in Syria is concerned, if we want it to stop, the number one thing that we can do is to stop supplying the terrorists with United States-made anti-tank missiles. That is what is keeping this war in power. The other thing is, if we could close the gaps in the Turkish border, Turkey is the number one supporter of ISIS, and it is the number one supporter of the Al-Qaeda rebels. If we close the gaps in with the Turkish border, which could be done because the Kurds almost did it themselves, that war would end. So it's in our power, and I think we ought to do it. We need to end that war and restore peace.
Absolutely agree here. We're on this very dangerous course that could literally result in a new world war, and that's going to be a bad day for everybody. So, Senator, thank you very much again for spending time with us today. It was a delight hearing you about your adventures in Vietnam and your honesty in describing the Syrian war as what it is, an unlawful war of aggression by the United States. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the rest of our show after these words from our sponsors. America, welcome back to our show here. I'm already getting emails from people who really liked our last guest. And, every once in a while you will find somebody who has the courage to say what they really feel about something, whether it's Richard Black, Cynthia McKinney, Ron Paul. There's a few good ones in there. We've got to care for them as an endangered species, I think. Now then, we are getting more and more information from San Bernardino. The report is now that the 3 suspected shooters were wearing tactical gear. They were all dressed up with guns. They were dressed in tactical gear. How do they know they're suspects and not part of the people who were training? Because California Highway Patrol has verified there was a police training exercise going on nearby. Tweets coming from within this inland regional center show that the people first thought the gunfire they were hearing was part of the drill. So, now they're out there emphasizing that the shooters had long guns. CNN is claiming they were AR-15s. We don't really know. And CNN has already said, those AR-15s, they've got to go. They've got to. You know something? If somebody doesn't have an AR-15, they'll use a hunting rifle or a shotgun. It's not the guns. These are bad people who did a bad thing for some reason. Propaganda, politics, gun grabber agenda, prescription psychiatric medication. I posted a comment over on the article about how Hillary has gone on her gun grabber agenda there, saying, you know, drunk drivers kill a lot more people than assault weapons, but nobody takes cars away from law-abiding safe drivers because of the actions of the drunk drivers. Only in the case of guns do they want to take guns away from all the law-abiding safe users of firearms because of the actions of crazies. And inevitably, I got the usual liberal response, well, cars have a useful purpose. Guns don't have any useful. Guns exist for just one thing. Wagging of the finger telepathically. That, of course, is nonsense. Guns have a lot of different uses. Guns can be used to chase pests out of your farm fields, which I did when I was a kid, growing up in New England farming country. That was something we did every day after school. Get out there with the rifle and kick dust up at the feet of whatever was munching on your carrots. You can put food on the table with a gun. I've done that too during my life. And you can chase criminals out of your home in an age where the average wait time for a 911 call is running about 15 to 20 minutes. And you can put holes in paper, which is a lot of fun. Now, I'm a big boy. I'll decide for myself what things can be used for. And you, the gun-grabbing, liberal, politically correct people, have no right to tell me what is or is not useful. If you don't know about pest control or hunting or protecting your home from criminals, then clearly you lack experience with firearms and are unqualified to comment in the first place. Just because you can't imagine a gun having any use has no effect on the rest of us who know how useful they are. But that's one of their big talking points. Well, of course we're not going to ban cars. Cars are useful. Guns have no use other than to kill people. Guns have a lot of uses that don't involve killing people. I mean, when I chased that crook out of my home, I didn't pull the trigger. All I had to do was put that laser sight on his forehead, and he was gone. We have areas in this country right now where law enforcement is encouraging people to get guns in their homes because crime is out of control between budgetary cuts on police departments that aren't funding themselves with civil forfeiture and the influx of all of these new criminals coming across the border. 179,000 of the illegal immigrants in this country have prior records of criminal convictions, including violent crimes, according to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Director. And I don't need to get on this issue too much. Every time the gun grabbers do another one of these campaigns, gun sales go through the roof. Got the commercial you were listening to on reloading kits because they're trying to dry up the supply of ammunition. They're scared of you. Do you understand how absolutely out of their minds scared of the American people the federal government has become? Remember, the Founding Fathers gave us that Second Amendment to hold government in check as a last resort to prevent the descent into dictatorship. One of the reasons Common Core has come under criticism lately is because they're trying to rewrite all the founding documents of this country. into contemporary language, but they've rewritten, changed the meaning of the Second Amendment, saying you can have a gun if you're part of a government-controlled militia. That's not what the Second Amendment actually says. You need to go back and read the originals. These are the rules, that Constitution and the Bill of Rights. That's the original contract with America. And the government of this country is the legal, legitimate government of this country only when it is 100% in compliance with that Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And if they don't want to follow those rules, the honorable thing to do is to resign and go into some other line of work. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call here. Michael in Brazil, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. I've been listening to your show for a long time. Never called in, though. But this situation in San Bernardino County really got me ticked off. And I knew it from the beginning that it's a false flag. I don't know how they managed to do this stuff. How they managed to recruit these nuts. But I tell you, I'm furious because I know it's an engineered situation here. And also, they want to disarm the people. They better start with the police because the police has been killing more people than terrorists have.
Yes.
And I want to know, why is it that they always zero in on the law-abiding citizens? They haven't done anything wrong. What's wrong with these people? And I'm looking at the stats on the internet. The cops kill almost somebody every day, and nobody calls for the disarmament of the cops. Besides, I live in Brazil. In Brazil, it is impossible to get a firearm.
Yes.
Okay. There are some instances when you can buy a legal firearm, but it has to be a very small caliber, like something of the size of a 22, maybe all the way up to 32 caliber, right? Mm-hmm. And the rest, a 9mm with a 40 caliber, it's called restricted ammunition, only for the use of the police and the military. These people in the United States, I'm an expat for almost 20 years now. And I've traveled Latin America very widely, right? And I can tell you something. Argentina is the only place where you can still buy guns with no problem. But the rest of Latin America, I'm talking about South America, not Central America. And Argentina is the only place where you can buy a gun legally. Whatever caliber, 40, 44, 45, 9mm, 10mm, whatever. But what really made me call your show, I never called before. I got so ticked off with this thing. And I knew days ago that there's going to be some kind of a false flag being in the works. Because these people are trying to disarm the law-abiding Americans to push this New World Order agenda. It's obvious. For Christ's sake, you don't have to be a PhD to figure this out.
Well, you'll generally find that the gun freedom tends to be inversely proportional to the degree of dictatorship in a society. And in countries like Argentina and Iraq before the invasion, those governments weren't afraid of their people, and you could buy whatever guns you want. When you have strict gun laws disarming the law-abiding, it's because the government is afraid. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, Mike. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. We're getting our latest updates from San Bernardino, and apparently the police have located at least one of the suspects, and apparently there's a little bit of a firefight going on there. They're still pushing the issue that these individuals were using long guns. They're not being specific, except for CNN, which was saying it had to be AR-15s. Could be hunting rifles. But they are hitting this point that these people were wearing tactical gear. In other words, they were dressed just like SWAT team members or soldiers. This was clearly planned and organized ahead of time to create a crisis to get Obama off that hook for that stupid comment he made in Paris by saying, see, we had 2 shootings in one day, one in California and one in Memphis, and the Memphis one fizzled. And the gun grabber trolls are already all over the web screaming, we've got to ban the guns. The only way we'll be safe from these crazy criminals with guns is to take the guns away from the law-abiding citizens. And of course, that's a joke. No gun ban in history has disarmed the criminals. And that's a fact. Our government is giving guns to terrorists. ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Our government is giving military weapons to Mexican drug cartels through the Fast and Furious program. It's only you, the law-abiding American citizen, that they're absolutely terrified of allowing to have any kind of weaponry. It's just like this whole thing with the NSA spying, which I'm starting to think was just a gigantic bluff anyway. We proved with our encryption challenges, real criminals and real terrorists can create systems of encryption the NSA cannot break. Period. End of discussion. Over in Paris, they weren't even using encryption. And still, this mass collection of data didn't stop the attack from happening. Probably because they wanted the attack to happen. False flags are nothing new. It is a common feature of history. Over at my website, we've got this article of 42 false flags officially admitted to by the governments that played these dirty tricks on their own people. And if they're admitting to 42, there's probably another 4, 5, 6,000 they're still trying to keep the lid on. They don't teach about this in the schools because false flags are useful. They want you to grow up ignorant of the fact that governments use dirty tricks to manipulate you and maneuver you. It's a very useful thing. We can't let the public know that this goes on here. It's absolutely absurd. Okay, they're saying one of the suspects is down from the engagement with the police, and maybe it's a shooter, maybe it's a patsy, designated patsy. Oh, his climate doubter, this guy doubted human-caused global warming. He reads WhatReallyHappened.com. He supports Donald Trump. They'll just pile it on there to try and get the maximum political benefit out of this that they can, because that's how these things actually work. Lies, fraud, and deception. That's all politicians are. They're charlatans. They're con artists. That's what they do. They take credit for anything good that happens, even if they had nothing to do with it. And anytime they make a mistake or they get caught in corruption, they find a scapegoat to blame it on. That's how they get to be politicians. I mean, look at all these stories we're getting about these, senior respected politician in New York convicted on all 7 counts of extortion and money laundering. Big surprise. Remember that picture we have of Hillary Clinton posed before the White House Christmas tree as First Lady with a known cocaine smuggler who was allowed into the White House by the Secret Service because he was a heavy Clinton donor. So obviously our sympathies go out to everybody who was killed today. All the more so because they were killed just to make a point. To give the gun grabbers bloody shirts to wave, saying, how many more people will we have to kill? I mean, how many more people will have to die before you law-abiding citizens will give us your guns? Because we, the money junkies, will never sleep soundly in our beds until you are all completely disarmed and helpless. It's like I was telling that last caller. The degree of gun freedom in any society is inversely proportional to the degree of dictatorship. When government trusts their own people, they have guns. I mean, I remember before the invasion of Iraq, the second one, not the first one started with that lie about the stolen incubators, but the second one, Saddam's nuclear weapons, that lie. I saw a video of Saddam Hussein in Baghdad coming out of some kind of a meeting, and there was a crowd around that started to cheer him, and he climbs up on the top of a car, wide open. And he waves and the people are cheering. Open windows all around. People carrying guns. In Saddam's Iraq, you could buy a machine gun. Does that sound like a tyrant who's afraid of his own people? You're allowed to have a machine gun? That's a good measure for how free a society really is whether the government trusts the law-abiding and safe shooter with firearms. And our government clearly does not. Every time they go out on another gun grabber tear, they're broadcasting how afraid they have become of the American people because we don't believe them anymore. We don't listen to them anymore. We don't trust them anymore. And we shouldn't. First and foremost, because they are the government. And history teaches us government should never be trusted. So they're going to be pounding on this one. And as far as the corporate media is concerned, this is the only story they've been on ever since it happened. More confirmations coming in about there was an active shooter drill taking place nearby, same time. The SWAT team conveniently, luckily, was already suited up and ready to roll. What an amazing coincidence. More tweets from the people who were inside saying they thought it was a continuation of the drill they'd just gone through. It's the same pattern we saw. FEMA was on the ground in New York the night before 9/11. The 7/7 tube bombing in London took place in the middle of a drill simulating a tube bombing. The attacks in France took place in the middle of a drill simulating a multi-site terror attack. That's the only way they can have all of the assets in place, ready to go to control the situation, to control the outcome, to control the access, so that nobody gets in there and gets an embarrassing picture. Oh, we're going to have a drill here today. We're training for this. Oh, my goodness, there's a real terror attack right in the middle of our drill. Go get them, guys. Amazing. Apparently down in El Salvador, they're running a crackdown on pedophile priests. The Archbishop of San Salvador, Jose Luis Escobar, has announced that Juan Francisco Galvez, a parish priest from the town of Rosario de Mora, has been relieved of ecclesiastical duties. And it is a problem. It's out of control. It's absolutely out of control. Vatican leaks trial engulfed by bizarre sex, Silvio Berlusconi blackmail, and Secret Services claims. Boy, oh boy. The Pope does have his work cut out for him. And apparently this trial involved some people who leaked out embarrassing information about the Vatican to the media, involving some of the sleazier aspects of what's been going on in there. And the more they've gone into the case, more and more tentacles show up, going places that a lot of people don't want them to go. Remember when the Vatican's banker wound up hanging underneath the Blackfriars Bridge in London? Finally, a little note from the world of science. For those of you who are my age and you remember the Apollo missions. When the Apollo would fly toward the moon, and the Apollo spacecraft would separate from the Saturn 4B, the third stage of the Saturn launch vehicle, they would crash that third stage into the moon, in part so it wasn't wandering around out there, inconveniencing people in the future. By the way, one of them still is. But they crashed him into the moon because it made a big sound, and the seismographs left at all the earlier landing sites would pick it up. And apparently they finally identified the crash site of the Apollo 16 booster, got a picture of it. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here, get something useful done with the rest of the day. We will be back tomorrow, Thursday, with the Lady Claire in our third hour here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay skeptical. Make good choices. Share what you know with everybody you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.